Joe Rogan was famous for having the opinion that mixed martial arts should be done bare knuckle. His reasoning for this was, well, if I can kick you bare shin, if I can elbow you bare elbow, then why can't I punch you bare knuckle? And, it's a funny argument because I don't think anyone is actually trying to make it. I think the prospects of having to punch or to get punched without a glove on does not sound appealing to many fighters. The only argument that makes sense is, well, it's more realistic that way. And yeah, it would be more realistic, but this would all be to the detriment of the fighter's safety. At least that's what my opinion was for a long time. With the advent of bare knuckle boxing making an appearance on the fighting scene, he actually changed his opinion. And it's not hard to see why, because bare knuckle boxing matches are absolutely brutal. I've never seen bigger bloodbaths in my life than one of these fights. By the time the final bell rings, these guys legitimately look like Freddy Krueger victims. The thing that made prime Tony Ferguson so scary was how bad he would damage your face with cuts. Well, in a bare-knuckle boxing match, you're going to be looking like that no matter who you're fighting. You see, when you punch somebody with a glove on, it distributes force among a larger surface area. Think of it like the difference between getting hit with the backside of a shovel and then getting hit with a hammer. That's the difference between a gloved punch and a bare-knuckle punch. That is why when Luke Rockhold fought Mike Perry, his teeth broke through his mouth guard. Because he got punched right in the mouth, and all of the force from that punch was distributed between Mike Perry's two big knuckles. Now, with all this being said, I'm sure you're sitting there wondering, okay, so the video is titled Bare Knuckle MMA is safer than regular MMA. So how on earth does any of that make sense, you absolute fraud? And here's what I will tell you. Junior Dos Santos had a bare-knuckle MMA fight against Fabricio Verdum. It had just popped up in my YouTube recommended a couple days ago. So I watch it and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be bad. These poor old retired fighters are this hurt for cash that they signed up for this. I was scared of what I was going to see. First thing I noticed, they're both jacked on a lot of testosterone replacement therapy. So, good for them. I'm glad they're doing this safely and that Masvidal's not testing these guys. And I watched the whole fight, and by the end of it, I was like, wow, that was actually a lot less nightmarish than I had anticipated. Verdum did have two pretty bad cuts, but the thing that surprised me, they didn't really seem to throw as many punches as I thought. And I went, So then I go and I click on another fight and I watch it and I went, made it all 3 rounds and neither of the guys have any cuts. And then I watched another one, also no cuts. And then another one, also no cuts. I watched like 8 fights. I didn't see very much damage done. And it hit me, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. The reason bare-knuckle boxing is so brutal is because it's bare-knuckle boxing. The only choice these guys have is to punch each other as many times as they can with their bare knuckle. But in a sport like MMA, where punching isn't the only option, all of a sudden you saw some different game plans being used. The fighters weren't marching to the center of the ring, chins down, and just swinging for the fences. No, they were maintaining distance. There were a lot of kicks, a lot of teeps. When they would clinch, there were more elbows and knees. And a lot more grappling exchanges opened up because of how much more realistic ground and pound is when your fists aren't protected. As everyone knows, your fists aren't meant to be blunt force objects. Your hands are made out of tiny little bones for intricate finger movements, and they break very easily when you punch something. You are shattering your hand if you land on the forehead or the sides of the head, anywhere other than directly on the face. Guys obviously still punch, but they're being way more careful about the placement of their punches and when it's used. They're not just raining haymakers in the pocket, because you can't do that. It's unrealistic. But it does make landing a punch much more devastating. Punching is now a very high risk, high reward strategy. The reason brain trauma is so much more problematic in boxing than the UFC is because you're hitting the head way more in boxing. MMA, the amount of concussive hits to the head are decreased because, for one, you have many more tools to strike with. And also, you hear it from so many fighters, how bad their hands hurt after fights. The smaller gloves leave their hands less protected. Well, completely get rid of the gloves, and now you've minimized the amount of concussive blows someone's going to take to the brain. Of course, with bare knuckle, the capacity for damage, it is really high. If there is a fight where a lot of punches happen to land, your face can get really cut up. But as a whole, there will be less brain trauma without the gloves. And that's the important thing that we're all trying to protect these fighters from. Because as much as I hate to admit it, all your favorite fighters right now, someone may be feeding them with a pitchfork by the time they're 60. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to see that.